Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are HangingOnToHope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast. This is Karen W. And today I am thrilled to say we have Leslie Vernick on the show. Leslie is a licensed clinical social worker and relationship coach, popular author, and speaker. Today, we're going to discuss her wonderful book, The Emotionally Destructive Marriage. Both Brenda and I read her book while we were still married and took the quiz she starts the book with that helps you discern if your marriage is difficult, which all marriages are at some point or another, or destructive, which is quite different. So welcome to the show, Leslie.
Thanks for having me. This is such an important topic.
It is.
Definitely. Hi, this is Brenda J. How are you?
Good. How are you, Brenda?
I am great. I read The Emotionally Destructive Marriage when I was still married, and I had just started therapy. My counselor had me read the book.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I was being abused physically and emotionally and spiritually, but I didn't know to what extent emotionally till I read your book and took the quiz. It was a big eye-opener for me, but only in the beginning of bringing awareness that I did not deserve to be treated this way, that this was not something that I needed to tolerate. It really did so much damage to my kids. I wish I would have opened my eyes much sooner to the reality and the truth. I love the subsequent title of the book, How to Find Your Voice and Reclaim Your Hope, because that is the path to healing and the purpose of our podcast. Continuing with part 2 with Leslie Vernick.
So you emphasize that God values marriage, but he's also concerned for your safety and sanity in the midst of a destructive and or dangerous marriage. One of the phrases you use a lot in your book is, if you're going to stay in this marriage, stay well. If you're going to leave your marriage, then leave well. You say, in other words, you're responsible for the person you are and are becoming in the fire of this marriage, like you've been saying. As I read your book, I committed this to prayer and God's leading. I completely surrendered to God and asked for his leading. Things happened in my marriage I could never have planned, and I believe God allowed the path of events to happen. So when things are covert, it's very difficult to find validation, which is why your book was so helpful. I remember watching you had all these videos on your website. I watched every single one of them, and I would just be in tears, just being so validated, because you're not validated a lot as a Christian woman on some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Your book gives 2 paths, and God leads. How do you encourage survivors to lean on God for the staying or the leaving?
So here's the thing, we don't like uncertainty. And so we think that if we don't make any decision, then things won't change. But things change all the time. Even if we don't make a decision is made, it's the decision to not decide, and it's a passive decision.
Right.
So I think it's much wiser to make an active decision. And here's the deal. No decision is a bad decision except for no decision, because no decision doesn't give you any information yet. It takes longer to get the information you need. So if you're sitting at a crossroads, and we don't have to do this anymore because we have GPS, but I'm old enough that I used to sit at a crossroads and I wasn't sure which way I should turn, right or left, because, I didn't get clear directions. And so Do I go right or do I go left? Do I go right or do I go left? Do I stay well or do I leave well? What do I do? And I don't have enough information to make a good decision. So when you're there, you have to make a decision, because just sitting at the crossroads isn't going to give you the information you need. So once you make a decision, I'm going to go left, and I turn left, and I'm walking or I'm driving down left. And I know that pretty soon I'm supposed to get to that church, because the wedding, they said, once you turn, you'll see the church in about 2 miles, and I'm 5 miles in. I haven't seen any church. So what does that tell me?
You went the wrong way.
I made the wrong decision. And guess what? I can turn around and I can go back and make the other decision. But I wouldn't know that unless I had made the first decision.
Right.
So this is where it's really important that we make minute by minute decisions and get information from those decisions, not worrying about the outcome. Like, is it a right decision? Even a wrong decision. I made a wrong decision, but now I got information that helped me to make the right decision.
Yes.
Right? The next right decision. So I'm going to give a couple biblical examples. When Ruth was widowed, in the book of Ruth. She had a decision to make. Am I going to go with Ruth or am I going to go back to my people? Her sister-in-law went back with her people. Her mother-in-law, Naomi, said, Ruth, go back, go back, go back. Ruth made a decision. Nope, I'm going with you. She didn't know what was going to happen next.
Right.
She just made that decision. So then when she gets to Bethlehem, the next decision is, you hungry? Yep, I'm hungry too. What should I do? Go out and glean the fields and pick wheat. That's what she did, right? She didn't know what was going to happen next. She just made that decision. And then it just so happened that it happened to be Boaz's field, right? And so God is behind the scenes as we make our decisions.
Right.
And Esther, another biblical character, biblical woman, she's in this quandary. She knows her people are going to get killed. She knows she needs to talk to the king about that, but how to do that, she doesn't know. So first decision, hey, everybody, let's pray. Let's fast and pray. We don't know what to do. Second decision, I got to go into the king, but I don't know. I'm not supposed to go into the king. Is he going to kill me? Because if he's not happy that I'm there, all he has to do is put down his sepulcher and I'm done.
Yeah.
So I'm going to trust God because that's the next decision I'm going to make. And then that door opened. And then you make the next decision. What are you going to do? Oh, come to dinner. She's flying by the seat of her pants.
Yes.
Trusting God with the next right decision. So here's what I tell women. If you're in danger of losing your life or losing your mind, then you need to get safe. And God values safety. In the Bible, in Proverbs, it says the prudent see danger and take refuge. Don't stay in danger. They flee. When baby Jesus was in danger and the authorities were seeking to harm him, Herod ordered the murder of every child under 2. And he didn't tell Joseph in the dream, I've put the government in authority over you, so submit and I'll protect Jesus. He didn't say that. He said, leave, flee. Yeah. God cared more about Jesus' safety than he did about honoring the authority that he put in place. When God told us in the 10 Commandments not to bear false witness, not to lie. And yet when Rahab in the Old Testament lied, they went that way when the spies were being sought after by her own people to kill them. And she lied and she hid them. She's commended in the Hebrews Hall of Fame. So God values your safety. He tells you to take responsibility for your safety. So that's your first decision. I have to get safe. You need to get a protection from abuse. You need to get a safety plan with a domestic violence expert. You need to get safe if you're in danger of losing your life. If you're in danger of losing your mind, you also need to get safe, because if you can't think or function right now and you feel like you want to kill yourself or kill him or just die in depression, you need to get to a safe place where you can get help. And that's your first priority, not fixing your marriage or doing anything like that. So that would not be staying well or leaving well. You're just leaving. All right. For those 2 reasons. But if you're in a decision, do I stay well or do I leave well? Maybe you make a decision. I'm going to stay well, not to get a marriage together, but because I have little kids and I don't have a job. And if I have to separate my little kids and let him babysit them, I think they'll get killed because he's so irresponsible and so mean that I don't trust that my kids would be safe with him. So I'm going to stay well right now. Meanwhile, I'm going to learn how to get a job and I'm going to go back to college, or I'm going to take some online classes so that when I do, or if that comes apart where it gets worse and I do need to leave, I can. Right? So staying well doesn't mean you try to make your marriage better. It means I'm going to live in this marriage in the best way I can to stay safe and keep my kids safe.
Good to see.
Right? Yeah. And leaving well means I'm going to separate for the purposes of reconciliation, as Paul tells us is permittable, and see what my husband does. And I'm going to leave and I'm going to have a good heart about it. And I'm going to say, look, if you want to do your work to repair our marriage, just like if you had a big leaky roof in your house, or let's say you had rats in your basement or mold on your wall and you were getting sick from that. And you said, hey, I got to move to another apartment until you get this fixed. And he's not willing to fix it. And it's not safe for you to live there. Right.
Right.
Well, then so if he's not willing to do repairs on broken trust and broken safety, and he's not willing to do his own work, then maybe you can't live with this person anymore because it's just not healthy for you to do so. But you don't resent him and live in resentment and hatred. You leave well, because some people leave and they're still unhealthy and they never do their work. And then they find another man to attach to, and he's abusive too, because they haven't done their own work to get healthy. Right. So you're going to leave well. You're going to leave well. Doesn't mean you may never remarry, but it means that you leave and you do your own work so that you're not looking for someone else to take care of you. Right. You're taking care of you.
Absolutely.
That's the purpose of the podcast too, is to educate people so they don't continue the same pattern again. And that was the thought in my mind when you said flee. We have a lot of people that listen to the podcast that have been out for 20 years, that have only been out for a few years. and then they tend to want to get into another relationship. But as soon as you see those same flags, they need to flee. Like, it doesn't matter how if you feel that danger, just get out and don't allow it to happen. And we even talk about keeping the walls up to keep those unsafe people out until you heal and educate yourself.
Yeah, because a pattern does keep repeating if you don't work on your own issues.
That's right. So it's not, so I think this is so important. And maybe I can close with the story. I was doing a business meeting in Phoenix with some business stuff that I had to learn in order to do my work in business. And I was talking to a woman at the table, and she said asked me what I did. And I told her, and she says, she goes, I married a sociopath. And she goes, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I said, tell me more. So here's a woman who's not a Christian. And she said, when I got married, I was so naive. I was so trusting. I had no boundaries. I was such a people pleaser. I don't think I would have ever become the woman I am now had I not had to put my brave on and pull my pants up and grow up really fast to deal with that. So instead of why did this happen to me, she was saying this happened for me to grow up. For me, I had a very harsh teacher, but I learned fast because he was such a harsh teacher that I learned fast and grew up fast. And so if your audience can begin to think of it that way, instead of how do I save my marriage? How do I save my man? But what is this teaching me about me? Maybe I'm overly dependent on what people think. Maybe I'm overly dependent financially, and I've never grown up to adult status where I can support myself if I need to. I just went from my daddy's house to my husband's house, and I'm wanting to play house, but I don't know how to really take care of me if I had to. And this is your work to do, to grow up to full adulthood. And that doesn't mean you have to work if you don't want to and you want to stay home with your children. I certainly stayed home with my kids for a little bit, but I could work if I had to. If my husband turned out to be a bum or died suddenly, I could support our family. Right. And this is so important that women take responsibility for their adulting. This is all your work to do, even in the midst of all this icky stuff that's going on. Instead of just looking at his work to do your work.
Yeah, I was married to a sociopath too. I don't know if I looked at it quite that way yet, but I do look at everything now. Like, what is God trying to show me through this?
Yes.
So my whole entire attitude has changed, and I am grateful, but I still struggle with the aftermath of it. So that still makes it hard.
And the consequences of that, I mean, if somebody, like Johnny Erickson Todd, I mean, it was her own, she jumped in the pool, but, somebody hit you with a car and you're paralyzed, you're still paralyzed, even though you probably learn a lot and have a effective ministry in that, you're still like, I wish that wouldn't have happened. Right.
Yeah. I'm not happy about it, but just to move on a little bit, you talk about 5 patterns that destroy a relationship and damage people. So we're going to go over these. The first one is reactive abuse. It occurs when a husband or wife or both are unable to manage their negative moods, frustrations in life, or tempers in a mature way. So in provocative or stressful situation, an eruption occurs. Did you want to expound on that at all?
Yeah, actually, if I were to write the book again, or if I had an opportunity to do a revised copy, I would change that a little bit. So let me just say that reactive abuse is that thing that we talked about when you or your husband is immature and you don't know how to control yourself, just like if you pooped in your pants, that would be immature. You would not have matured enough to tell. Doesn't mean you might not ever have an accident. Sometimes we do. But that if that's a pattern in your life, then you're not mature enough to know how to handle your own emotions. And we see this in our culture a lot right now. People are name calling and they're not willing to listen to another person's point of view. They just want to demonize and they want to attack and shame and blame and accuse. That makes for poor relationships. And we see this. I mean, we used to have a country, I'm old enough to remember, where, you might disagree on topics, but you would have debates about them and you would learn from the other side different points of view that you hadn't thought about because nobody was calling each other names. They were debating about the issue, not attacking the person. We don't really know how to do that anymore very well. And so when we act that way in a relationship and we're just reacting, we're not listening and we're accusing and attacking and blaming, I call that reactive abuse. But I do want to say also, there's something that happens when you resist control that may look abusive if you aren't careful, especially as a counselor. So I've nuanced this a little bit when I'm trying to teach pastors and people helpers when people come to them. So for example, if a husband is being oppressive to a wife, and we can resist abuse in a constructive or healthy way, or we can resist abuse in an unhealthy way for sure, but I wouldn't call it abuse back. All right. This is really important biblically if you have a strong Christian audience, because women have been told, oh, just turn the other cheek, right? Yeah. Just walk the extra mile, because that's what Jesus says to do. Jesus isn't actually saying that with relationships. He's saying do that with strangers. So if you're in a culture that's oppressing you, so if a Facebook stranger is mean to you, or you're having a conversation with someone you don't know and they're forcing you, live in a culture where in Russia right now, or they would force someone to do something. He says, you know what? Don't retaliate. Just go the extra mile. You can still have agency. Martin Luther King said it really well. He said, when someone treats you as a nobody, you can still be a somebody. You have agency here. You can go the extra mile. You can do the right thing. So that's what he's teaching about handling oppression. When Peter says, hey, if you're a slave and your slave owner is a nasty jerk slave, hey, you can still do the right thing because that's who you are. Don't let his ickiness rub off on you, right? So that's what he's saying when someone is over you. He's not saying you're in a relationship with this person. They're over you. They're oppressing you. He says you can resist with subtle ways by just not letting them get to you, not listening to them, not believing them, all right? You still might have to do what they tell you to do, but inside you're not getting oppressed. But he says, when your brother or sister sins against you, now you have a relationship with someone. He doesn't tell you to turn the other cheek. He tells you to go to them and talk to them. And if you have this conversation and the person repents, you can reconcile the relationship. But Jesus is also pretty savvy here. And he says, but if they don't listen, then take it to the church. And if they still don't listen, now your relationship is compromised. You don't have a good relationship anymore. Treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. Was, again, that stranger, polite stranger, love your enemy person, not you're sleeping with your enemy. Right. And so it's two very different things. So going back to your first question about resisting abuse. So I wouldn't call resisting abuse reactive abuse. So for example, if a husband is holding his hands out and won't let a wife leave the room, and she pushes him to get out of the way because she's scared or because she needs, to get out of there, I wouldn't call that abusive. I would call that self-defense or getting to safety.
Right. Survival mode.
Right. Okay. The same way as if a rapist was raping you and you punched him in the nose to get out of there. It's not reactive abuse. It's you're trying to get to safety and you're doing whatever you can do to get to safety. So I would have clarified that more in my book, because sometimes, a woman will do that and she leaves a scratch or whatever, and she's calling the police and they're accusing her of domestic violence, when the whole situation, if you looked at it, was really, she was resisting being controlled.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So he was controlling her, pinning her down or blocking her door or forcing her to do something she didn't want to do. And she's reacting to get safe, not to cause harm.
Okay.
Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. The next one's controlling abuse. So threats and forced use to make the other give in. So
and we've talked about that, just
self-explanatory.
And I think that whole headship and submission piece of that for the Christian woman is, oh, my husband has the right from God to control me because he's the head. And that's not the definition of headship biblically. The definition of headship biblically, Jesus warned his disciples, showed his disciples, taught his disciples, hey, if you want to be the head, if you want to be the leader, this is what it looks like. I'm going to wash your dirty feet. It looks like servant leadership, that you go last. Don't rule over others like the Gentiles do. That's not my definition of headship, guys. Over and over and over again, he was teaching his definition of headship. So this whole misapplication of this passage that headship means I get my way and you don't have any say is not headship. It's called selfishness in the Bible.
Yeah. And I think controlling abuse is the easiest one to recognize, as far as, because I was deceived in everything. I went through it all. That one, the control was very easy to recognize. I just thought it was okay because of that authority you're talking about.
Right. It's emphasized. And
being a Christian. Yeah. You just let them control you. You think that's godly, and that's not. The next one's deceit. So if deceit and attack become a regular part of interactions, there's no clear communication, no resolution to the problem, and no healing. It's impossible to have a close, loving relationship with someone you can't trust, can't talk with, or who won't take a look at himself when he hurts you.
Right. Yeah. And we've talked about the importance of safety and trust. Safety and trust. So if you don't feel safe with someone, God has hardwired us to want to get out of there.
Yeah.
Our biology
Yeah.
is hardwired to go off with alarm bells when you don't feel safe with someone, even in subtle ways. If you've ever been in a robbery or something like that, and you start to get that intuitive sense, like your hairs on your arms go up and things like that. There's a really good book about that called The Gift of Fear. God is hardwired our biology, our amygdala part in the back of our brain, to alert us to danger.
Right.
And so if you are living into that situation constantly, understand that it wears down your immune system internally. That's only supposed to be for emergencies, not for lifelong living with someone.
Right.
Yeah.
Very
And the
true.
next one's dependence. So the only person who should be totally dependent on someone else to meet all his or her needs is an infant. 2 types of unhealthy dependence. I need you to love me in order to be okay. You complete me. And I need you to need me in order to be okay. And I like those 2 examples that you give there.
Yeah, because it's sort of like I've put my entire well-being in someone else's hands. And that's not what an adult does. That's not what a healthy adult does. Marriage doesn't ask you to do that. Marriage is 2 healthy adults who want to live together and partner together. It's not one child who's unhealthy, sucking the breast of another child or adult that is an adult body. And so I think we have romanticized marriage, and we have read too many Harlequin novels and, watched too many Jerry Maguire movies.
I know. I always think
you complete me.
It's so wrong.
That's idolatry, actually.
Right.
It's idolatry. The only person who completes us, because God made us complete.
Yeah.
The only person who fills us is God. Marriage is hard work. I've been married 46 years. It's hard work. It's hard work. Doesn't mean there's not great moments. And there's also really yucky moments, but it's a lot of work. And if 2 people aren't willing to do the work to create trust and safety and maintain trust and safety, it doesn't matter how beautiful of a house it is at the beginning. If you build a new house and it's beautiful, it has everything you want, but you never clean it. You never take out the garbage. You never dust it. You never mow it. You never pull the weeds, and you never fix it. You never fix the termites, or you fix the toilet leaks, or you fix the dishwasher leaks, or you fix the roof leaks. In 1 year, that house is going to look like a wreck.
Yeah.
Right. And so the maintenance and the repairs that are needed for any relationship are needed and necessary. And we don't really talk very much about that. It's only forget the past. It's not. It's right here in the present. Mm-hmm. And if a couple isn't willing to talk about that and work on that, everyone needs to. If we're not willing to, or we can't, or we don't know how, and we're not willing to learn how, the relationship isn't going to survive. You can live together in an old, moldy, broken down house if you want, but it's pretty unpleasant and it's often unsafe.
Yeah. And we need to be okay. Basically saying we need to be okay without that other person. They can't meet those needs. We need to be okay and have God meet those needs.
Yeah. I mean, we have social needs. God has hardwired us to connect with other people. Mm-hmm. So picture two people standing together as equals, and you're both standing and you're having fun together and you're interacting. If we had put our 2 hands together, just like 2 people. But if you had a friend who was always putting their body weight on you and leaning on you, I mean, how long would you be able to do that before you push them back and say, get off me?
That's good.
Right? It's exhausting. It's exhausting.
Yeah. And the last one's indifference, the opposite of love. I found this interesting when I reread this. So indifference is the opposite of love. It says, I don't care enough about you to give you my time, my energy, or any other resource to show interest, care, or love towards you.
Yeah. I mean, I think indifference is one of the worst means of emotional abuse, because what we're saying in our wedding vows is, I promise you, I will never be indifferent to you. You will be the most important person that I care for, because we do have limited time, energy, and money. So we can't just give our money to everybody, or we can't give our time to everybody. But we promise in that marriage vow that I will give you my resources. I will share my resources with you, of my time, my energy, my money, my talents. And if I don't, after marriage, what I'm saying is, you aren't important. And the studies now on child neglect childhood neglect, that's some of the worst damage that's done to a child when a parent is basically indifferent. I don't care what you do. I'm not here for you. I can't even bother to spank you. Do what you want.
Right.
Right. So a child grows up feeling devalued by their parent. And so when you live with someone who says, whatever you need, whatever you feel, whatever you want, whatever you desire, whatever's important to you, isn't important to me. Don't bother me. Don't bother me. You can't have the family resources to go back to college. Don't bother me. I had a woman who woke her husband up in the middle of the night. She had an appendicitis or kidney stones or something. She needed to go to the emergency room. He said, don't bother me. Call an Uber.
Yeah, that's a horrible feeling.
Yeah, it's a horrible feeling. Like if I'm in trouble, my husband won't answer the phone and pick me up. And he says, call AAA, or I need to go to the emergency room and I'm not important enough, or I need medicine, and don't spend the money.
Yeah.
Right. Or I have a tooth problem and I can't go to the dentist. Yet he can buy man toys and he can do stuff that he wants to do, but I'm not allowed to go to a women's retreat. It's all this kind of stuff that I'm here to serve him. And whatever I need isn't important. I've had women who've had surgery and come home from the hospital, and their husband never asks them, what can I bring you to eat? And they might go a whole day without eating because they can't get out of bed and no one's checked on them.
Wow. Yeah, that message that's being sent is very damaging.
Kind of like how my life has been. So,
yeah.
Oh, in your book, you say when you stop pretending and try to make some changes, there's always a possibility that your spouse will react negatively. He may see it as you vying for power and may attempt to flatten you back down by his strong negative reaction. I know it feels too big and overwhelming, you say, to even think of making changes, but there's something inside of you that knows you must, not only for you, but for your children and even for your marriage. And I definitely found this to be true. It's important to emphasize safety as things can quickly escalate at this point. What advice do you have in the empowerment and honesty that must come for the survivor and balancing that with moving cautiously?
And also, and before that too, if you wanted to add the answer to, like, at what point do you know that you've done all you can?
Well, I think you've done all you can when you've told the truth. I don't like living like this. I'm willing to get help for me. Are you willing to get help for you? So I think this is really important that I say this out loud, because I didn't say this in the book. I implied it, but abuse of any kind is not a marriage problem. Abuse, addictions, adultery is not a marriage problem. So you don't go to marriage counseling, all right? Because you're going to get confused there. So abuse, addiction, and adultery, deceit, all that goes with adultery and addictions is a personal character issue. And until the person takes responsibility for that and gets some help for that, there is no repairing the marriage. The damage to the marriage is real for sure, but you can't repair something when the problem is still there. So if you have termites in your house and there's all kinds of wood damage, you don't repair the wood damage until you get rid of the termites. Yeah. And so, so when you have sin issues in someone's life that are repetitive and hurtful to the marriage, of course, the marriage is going to get damaged, but you can't fix the marriage until the person who's damaged the marriage owns it and does something about that habit pattern, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why going to counseling as a couple is, I mean, we did that, and that.
Yeah. It's because it's always going to be turned on to something you did that caused him to act that way.
Right.
Or let's put the past in the past and start fresh. But those things don't work. And so it's really important that we understand that when we get strong enough to say, I won't live like this anymore. And this is not my problem that you cheat on me, or this is not my problem that you lie to me. I don't trust you. Are you willing to get help for your problem? And if he's not, no, you've done all you can do. Just like Jesus talked to Judas after the Last Supper, and Judas still did what he was going to do. Yeah. And I think sometimes we have this idea that there must be something I can do to convince him. Maybe not, because he doesn't want to change. He doesn't want to humble himself and take responsibility for what he's done and to learn to do it differently. You're just supposed to get over it. Forgive, forget, show more mercy, then you're the unforgiving one. Now you have a hard heart. That's not true. Right. You're calling him into accountability for his behavior to change or his attitudes to change. And he doesn't want to, because he's entitled to have those if he wants to. And he is. God gives us all a free choice. So wash your hands. Wash your hands of it. That's what Jesus says. If you've tried to talk to somebody, he told his disciples, if you go out evangelizing someone and they don't want to hear you, don't waste your time. Wash your hands and move on. And I'm not saying that quickly in a marriage, but what I am saying is give up the idea that somehow you can change him. You can invite someone to change. Hey, you're eating so unhealthy. I'm so concerned about your diabetes. You're not long for this world if you keep doing this, but you can't make him change.
Right.
Right. No one can make anyone change.
Yeah.
But it's important to emphasize the safety of that, because if you do decide to change, of course, in any kind of that relationship, it can escalate into.
Well, that's right. And so that's where, if you're listening to this and you say, this is me and this is what I want to do, don't do it until you consult with, at the very minimum, an expert from the domestic violence shelter, which is totally free, or they have a toll-free number. It's 1-800-799-SAFE, safe. So all you have to remember is it's an 800 number, SAFE is the last 4 digits, and 799. So 1-800-799-SAFE. And they will walk you through a safety plan, because if you do separate, that does create a little bit more risk for you, or you threaten to separate, that creates more risk. But there's other factors also, like, does he have guns in the house? Has he ever threatened you with that kind of thing before? And other checklists to see how dangerous of a situation are you in. And if you're not safe, then you don't tell him you're leaving. You just leave and get yourself in a place, and then you let him know, or you leave him a note, or whatever you're going to do.
Yeah. So that kind of answers the first question you asked, like just moving cautiously.
Right.
And
Having a safety plan.
Empowerment and honesty kind of was the core part we talked about. You say you must identify the lies you believe and the wrong thinking patterns you regularly use. One of the biggest lies you may believe is, I am not enough. In other words, you're not good enough, not pretty enough, not spiritual enough, not acceptable enough, not smart enough, not skinny enough, etc., to be loved and valued. When we believe this lie, our growth goal becomes, I want to be enough, which is like chasing your tail. Whoever feels good enough in every single area of their life. As soon as we feel good enough in one area, 10 other areas pop up where we don't feel good enough. Lies keep us stuck and unable to grow. What are ways your support groups encourage telling ourselves the truth?
That's such a good question for women in general, because it's, even women in good marriages have the
I was reading this and I'm like, I listen to this all the time, because we do help emergency abuse victims too. And I hear this, and I think we all struggle with it.
Yeah. I think this is a very, very common problem.
When is it ever going to be enough? Yeah.
It isn't ever going to be enough if you're required to fix all of his emotions, all of his financial problems, all of his discouragement, frustration, because you can't do that. He's responsible to do that. And so you will never be enough to be God for him, right? You will never be enough to be God for him. And love isn't something that you can be enough for. Love is a gift that you give. It's not something you earn from someone. It's a gift. You love someone even when they're not enough. A parent loves a handicapped child. They're not a perfect child. Or a parent loves a boy child when they wanted a girl child, because they choose to, right? They choose to. Love is a gift by the one who loves. God loves us. When are we ever enough for God to love, right? So God loves us because he created us and he made us and he loves us. And even when we make a mistake, he still loves us. And so if we could divorce the idea of being good enough to be loved, what baby is good enough to be loved? They're just loved, but they're not loved by everybody. They're loved by their parents. That's it. They're not loved by the nurses or the doctors or other people, strangers. They're just loved by their parents. Sometimes they're not loved by their parents. And does that mean they're not worthy? So a mom who gives birth to a baby in a gas station bathroom and then rolls it in plastic and throws it in the trash, is that baby not enough? Not at all. It's a beautiful baby. Somebody would love it. Someone would love to give their gift of love to that baby, just not that mother. And so when you're not loved by someone, understand it's not about you at all. It's about the other person's decision not to love you for whatever reason of theirs. And if I could say one more thing that might be, I'll just put it in a practical way. We talked about the zinnia flower. Not everybody loves zinnias. Right? I like them, but not everybody does. Yeah. Some people prefer roses. Some people prefer daffodils. Some people prefer plants instead of flowers because they're allergic to flower, whatever.
Right. Everyone has their preferences.
Everybody has their preferences. And this is what women do. They sniff around the air like, what's the most popular flower? Oh, most people like roses. I should be rose. Why am I not enough to be a rose? What's wrong with me, God, that I can't be like her? She's the rose. And look at all the guys who love roses. And I'm
That's so
zinnia over here. And I haven't found anybody who loves me. Right. Yeah. And so then what we do is we start copying what roses do. Mm. And we will never be a good rose if we're a zinnia. Right. And so what we try to do is we try to kind of pretend that we're a rose, but we're really a zinnia. So now we have a lose-lose situation because the other person isn't really getting a rose. So they're going to complain like, this doesn't feel very rose-like and you don't smell like a rose. And you're like, I'm trying so hard.
Trying to be a rose.
Yeah. And he's going, I don't know. I don't know. My old girlfriend was a really smelly rose and you're not such a, and you're trying to be what he wants instead of being who you're supposed to be. You see, when you are a really beautiful zinnia, those who love zinnias will come right to you and they won't even see the roses.
That's so nice.
And this is where women need to come into themselves and be the best you. That's why it's important for you to steward you. You be the best you. If you're a watermelon, be the juiciest watermelon because people who love watermelon will come right to you and want you. And people who won't, But it's not because you're not a good watermelon. It's because they don't like watermelons.
Yeah.
Yeah, very true.
That's
Don't try to be a
great. I like
strawberry
that
if you're a
example.
watermelon.
Don't be a strawberry because you're not going to taste right. And then you're going to feel like you're not enough because you're trying to be something you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And God's lately just having me embrace and love myself for who I am and see
Yes.
the uniqueness. And if someone doesn't like that, they don't like it. And if
Right.
they do, they do, but I'm not going to change who I am ever again. I molded myself
Yes.
into someone that I wasn't my entire marriage. And now I'm discovering who I am
Yep.
and I'm living that and I'm trying to love who I am. I'm not trying to change it. I'm not
And
trying to
love. If you go to an ice cream parlor, how many of you love every single flavor there? You don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have
You have a favorite, and that's where you want, and that's what you want to be. You want to be the best chocolate ice cream, the best strawberry ice cream, the best. My sister's husband, he loves daiquiri ice. I'm like, who would want to eat daiquiri ice cream? I would never want that, right?
To me.
And it's nothing. It's wonderful for him, and it's not good for me.
Yeah.
Right. And so stop being what you're not, and maybe then you will feel like I am fully who I am.
Yes.
And someone who loves that about me and loves that I'm outgoing and extroverted and loud and I'm hooting and hollering at the baseball game won't tell me to shut up. I'm embarrassing him.
Right.
Yeah. You just got to be, that's what I'm trying to work on at this point in my life too. Just be the best Karen that I can be.
And don't get me wrong. What I said before, those things that were not good that needed to be changed. Of course I worked on those things, but now that I'm embracing who I am, I have worked on all those things that need to be changed though.
That's right. So if you're a wilty zinnia or you're a flat flavored ice cream that doesn't have much chocolate in it, then do what you need to do to be that better.
Yeah.
But don't try to be like her because she's got 5 boyfriends and you only had 1.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
There are certain flavors that are more popular.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to be that and that's not who you are, it's a lose-lose because you can never feel love for who you are. You've got to pretend. And that person is going to be disappointed. If they really wanted daiquiri ice and I just pretended, he's going to figure that out pretty fast.
Yeah.
Right. It's not going to go well.
Right.
I just want to wrap this up. I know we're running out of time, but I think this question is important. You say a marriage that has no boundaries or conditions is not psychologically healthy, nor is it spiritually sound. It enables your spouse to believe that the normal rules of life don't apply to him. You must speak up, set boundaries, and when necessary, implement consequences in a healthy way. I've been talking about that. So you say to document, and I'm thankful for my journals. I mean, I've been reading my old journals because I kind of have this project that I'm doing, and they are so validating for me. But it says in Matthew 18:15-17, Jesus said that when you told someone that his behaviors have hurt you and he refuses to listen, bring other witnesses in. Documentation can be a witness since other people don't often see these things. And for me, it was so covert and subtle that, I look back and it just was very validating. So can you talk about this a little bit more, just the documentation?
Yeah. So if we're going to walk in core, I'm courageously committed to the truth. So when you're in a subtly covert abusive situation, it's very easy for one of the techniques that the subtle abuser uses is deflection and gaslighting. And deflection is, it's never my fault and it's always your fault, or it's you don't understand, or you're just not understanding wisely, or you're not as smart as me. It all gets deflected. All the bad gets deflected off of them. You misunderstood and it's all your problem. And then all the gaslighting of rewriting the narrative. And we see again, we look at the news, we see people on one hand writing the story one way, and another person writing the story another way. And the public is like, which is true? Who's telling the truth? We don't know, right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to be courageously committed to truth, the best thing that you could do is write things down so that when he comes at you and says, we never had that conversation, or that never happened that way, or I never said that, you're not going to prove it to him by saying, look, I wrote it down on this date. I mean, you could try, but he's going to say, you were crazy then and you're crazy now. So that's not going to change his mind, but it will help you. It will help you say,
your sanity.
Yes, it'll help your sanity say, I'm not crazy. I wrote it down and I know it's true. So I see now that he's gaslighting me. I see now that he's deflecting. And I see that more clearly now because I do have a record. Because who hasn't been I've been married 45 years or 6 years. My husband has said, I said that. And I'm like, no, you didn't. I don't remember you saying, we all have those moments where they think they said it or we think they didn't. And who wins? You don't know. But when that becomes a toxic part of your relationship, or you're crazy or you're wrong or you're bad, I would start documenting, because here's that decision. I'm going to document and it'll show you one of two things. either he's right and you are misremembering things, or you're right.
Yeah.
And he's lying, right? Either way, if you're not remembering correctly and you see that over time, then that will help you get help that you need.
Right. I mean, for me, it was my way of coping. I mean, I'm just a big journal. I don't know that not everyone journals, but for me, that's just how I coped. I just wrote everything out and I vented. But then what's beautiful about looking back at it now is I see I vented a lot and I wrote about a lot of things because I was confused and I was trying to sort it out. But then God would start speaking truth into all of that. And that's what I find the beauty in looking back at all my old journals. It's like God was speaking, God was validating me. And it's such a beauty. I mean, it's bittersweet because it's painful because it's almost like watching a videotape of my past when I read my journals because I just vented so much. But I also saw God speak to me truth. And I see that, slow awakening as I go through my journals. And so I know not everyone does document, but especially in those cases where there is a lot of confusion, or like they saying, you never asked forgiveness for that. And that was, you can look back and say, you can read it and see you did. So if that is a common issue, if somebody that doesn't like to journal, maybe just start journaling things like that just for your own sanity.
Yeah. So documenting is different than journaling. Journaling is a processing kind of, with yourself, and documenting is to have evidence of. And I think
I have more documentation. Wasn't really journaling. I just documented everything, every incident, everything that happened that I could remember.
And even things, holes in the wall from a fit of rage, turned over table, take pictures, an injury, take pictures, go to the doctor, get that documented. You were the doctor, you did have an injury, you told the doctor the truth. All these kind of things are only going to be in your favor if later you have to go to court or you're in the middle of a divorce. And then you can say, this is the pattern. This is the pattern. I documented it.
Yeah. And mine, I wrote a really long order of protection, which was really good because my story's so crazy that I think I block out believing it. And then I look back and I go, wow, this really happened.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy. So we're going to wrap up this with some good one-liners from your book.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and start here. So God calls us to be biblical peacemakers, not peacekeepers or peace fakers.
Change is hard, and sometimes we're only motivated to change when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the fear or pain of making the change.
It's not your husband's lies that will do the most damage to you. It's the lies you tell yourself.
When we lose empathy and compassion towards others or never had it, our darker, selfish sides will always rule. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add to any of those, but those were really good, powerful one-liners.
Yeah, I would just repeat the two that I said, that God does not care more about the sanctity of marriage than the safety and the sanity of the people in it. And then the other one-liner would be that addictions, adultery, and abusive behaviors are not marriage problems. They cause marriage problems, but they're not the core issue that needs to be dealt with first.
Yeah, so be cautious of doing marriage counseling together.
So good. This is such great information.
Yeah, we're so incredibly thankful for your work. I know Brenda and I both are, and everything that you do. I see you on Facebook. I was actually part of one of your early Conquer groups, and early on, and that was just so helpful. So you gave us validation, awareness, and courage to stand up for truth. So, do you want to share your resources that you can offer to our listeners?
Yeah. So we have a website at leslievernick.com, and there's a quick start guide there. It will be soon. We're in the process of putting it together where some people can get some quick starts on what is a destructive relationship. Am I in a destructive relationship? What's the difference between a difficult relationship? Then if I am in a destructive relationship, what are my first steps to start to do so I can start to get healthier and stronger? Our Conquer membership is closed right now, but it's open twice a year. And that's a wonderful educational support group for Christian women in destructive marriages. And information about that is on our website as well. We have coaching groups and individual coaching if you want some help to work through that core strength, or you want to build, a better sense of yourself. We have 2 different coaching groups that are offered. And so if you just hang out with us for a while on YouTube or Facebook Lives, or join our mailing list where you get the information when things open, you'll find out all about us.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I found was the most interesting thing is I picked your book back up, and I read your book and took those tests while I was still in the marriage. And to see the answers that I put, it just brought so much back. And just to see over the 4 years and being out, how much I've healed. It's been an incredible journey. And I just want to thank you so much for being on the podcast and just how much you've helped me personally. And I hope I'm sure you're going to help our listeners just as much.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This is such an important topic for women to talk about. And I think at this point, we keep waiting for some sort of rescuer, the, pastor, the policeman, the, husband, the other husband. But I think women have to help other women now. And I think
Yes.
that's where we have to learn to stand on our own 2 feet and not look for a rescuer or a Prince Charming, but learn to come into our own strength as women and be the person that God calls us to be. So it's great that you're at a place where you're healed enough and strong enough to be able to bring alongside another woman and saying, here's the steps, walk in them. And so I'm glad you're doing it.
That's what our podcast is all about, is just you want to help as many of our listeners as possible and just be that validation that's so important.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So it's so important.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We so appreciate your work.
Yeah, it was so wonderful to meet you. And thanks for being on the podcast.
You're so welcome. Take care. God bless.
Yep. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
There's a quiz in here, 16 traits to a healthy marriage. My spouse shows care and concern for me and my needs. No, I put no. My spouse has my best interests in mind. No. My spouse asks my opinions on things. No. My spouse trusts me. No. This is what I put when we were married. My spouse takes responsibility and apologizes when he is wrong. No. My spouse asks for my opinion on things in our marriage. No. My spouse is considerate of my feelings. No. When we have a problem, my spouse is willing to talk about it. No. My spouse allows me to be myself. No. My spouse allows me to make my own decisions. No. My spouse allows me to disagree. No. My spouse is good steward of our finances. No.
Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening. And until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.